Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. If you've been keeping up with us over the last few years, we've been talking to leading voices in the podcast world about what they create, why they create it, and the impact that they want it to have on the world. And we're mixing it up a little bit here. We are actually pivoting to a true roundtable format where you get to hear multiple voices, more than two. And like we say in the name, this is our industry edition. So it's going to be a little less focused just on creators and more about how people that are actually working in the media and audio industries can adapt to the news and actually take action that's going to have real world positive consequences. I am your host, Dan Granger, and today I'm joined by a powerhouse panel of my fellow agents of influence. You're going to hear some folks you haven't heard before. We have Kristen Duenas, who is our associate media director at Oxford Road. Welcome, Kristen.
Hello.
So glad you could make it back. She has been here before, but you have to be a very serious listener to know that. We have Spencer Semonson, media buyer at Oxford Road. I've been begging Spencer to join us on the Media Roundtable for a long time, and she finally caved and showed up today. So welcome, Spencer. I'm so grateful that you've made it with us.
Yes, you've broken down my defenses, and I'm here at last.
Thank you. Okay, and then also somebody you will recognize, a recurring figure on this panel is the one and only, the great Stew Redwine, VP of Creative Services at Oxford Road. So thank you for coming back, Stew. You're very
welcome.
Brave.
Always happy to be here.
Welcome, everyone. I am loving this new format. I got to, we've done one that we've posted where I was involved doing the normal MC stuff, and then one when I wasn't, and Jennifer took over the hosting. And I got to tell you, I'm really, really excited about this format. I think that it's got a little bit of an electricity because I think we're actually talking about like a lot of present day stuff and trying to take these odds and ends news stories that come through and go, okay, what does this actually mean? How do we actually do something with this? Because I think news is always interesting, but how does it impact our lives and how can we actually make different decisions? That's a whole different way to look at it. And so I'm really excited about what we're doing here. There's a lot to talk about. I'm just going to call out some of the latest stories that came out of PodNews, just as an update. And then I think we should get into some of the planned stories, which are a little bit meatier. But, one of the things that came out today that was really interesting is that somebody got into the top 100 on the Apple charts with 10 listens and 24 followers. So that was kind of an interesting reminder of what can sometimes seem like the arbitrary nature of the ratings game in podcasts, which isn't always just reflective of aggregate listens. Or sessions. We also found out that a group of vets out of Pacific Content launched a new company called Bumper. They're a podcast growth agency. So, we're in the advertising side of the business. A lot of people have been trying to figure out, like, how do I grow my show? There are millions and millions of shows, and it's not always so straightforward how you can actually build that audience. So now rather than just PR, they're actually marketing firms specializing in the development of shows. And I think that's very exciting. We keep seeing industry news come out about the earnings from the top audio groups that are originally focused on radio. The latest to come out was Odyssey. They showed that they had $69 million in what's called digital audio revenue. And podcast was a big part of that, and they're up year over year 18% on that. So the industry continues to build. The radio incumbents continue to retrofit their organizations to accommodate all of the evolution of the podcast industry. And then I think one other big story that just came out is there was a judgment in the civil trial of Alex Jones, where he's now been ordered by a jury to pay $45 million in punitive damages for some of the things that he's been saying. And I think, we talk a lot about misinformation, and it turns out that there can actually be a real monetary cost. We talk about the cost to society, to our culture, to democracy, and to fair debate. But when you see somebody getting a bill for $45 million, you go, okay, whether or not you care about the human impact, there are going to be monetary consequences if you are not thoughtful and mindful. And if you err on the side of being exploitative of things that you could say just to engage an audience. So interesting things happening in the marketplace. Now, none of these are the things we're going to talk about today. I just wanted to catch you up a little bit. What we're going to talk about today, we have 5 or 6 topics we're going to go through, depending on how much debate we have around or discussion we have around the subjects. And the first one is going to be presented by Spencer. Spencer, tell us what's going on in brand safety.
Yeah, right out of Inside Radio comes an article about Sounder. It is a service that will automate brand safety with a tool that'll help speed podcast ad growth. We've heard some rumblings in this space, first with Spotify, with Assembly, and then iHeart. But Sounder seems to make the most progress with the actual dashboard. And from a buyer's perspective, brand safety is a large concern in planning. It's one of the main things that we are asked to accommodate most of all. So they're doing something that possibly Barometer is doing. So what are the key differences? What should we look at?
You're kicking that back over to me, I take it, just because I've been working with. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, look, this has been the, I think, primary market result of the work that we've been doing on the Media Roundtable has kind of culminated in, last year it was the advancement with the media bias chart in partnership with Adfontes Media, where you could see reliability and bias plotted out for podcasts. That was a new thing. Earlier this year, those that have been close to the show saw that we partnered with a group called Barometer, and you can learn more at thebarometer.co, to actually have a brand safety tool that would take industry standard metrics. The GARM, Global Advertisers for Responsible Media, they've got these criteria about what constitutes brand safety. And with Barometer, we were able to use AI to provide risk profiles for podcasts in accordance with those standards. And then in addition to that, on the Barometer side, we've also been able to integrate the beginning of some Media Roundtable values, starting with tolerance, which is something we've been promoting on this show. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to our heart. So the first thing I want to say is look, I think it's good news for the industry, and it's good news for the country that we are seeing a real demand for people to get better insight about the information that they're listening to and the information that they are putting dollars behind. So we like to see that momentum. We're happy for our friends at iHeart, who have been backers of the Sounder initiative. And, from that standpoint, very happy about what we see. Just in full disclosure, we are deeply financially and spiritually intertwined with the work of Barometer. And so, of course, it's hey, wait a minute, why do we need anybody besides our solution? But I think what's most important is, what is the real purpose of any of these tools? It is, at its worst, at its lowest form, it's just a way for marketers to not get in so much trouble and not get heat for associating with things that might not be interpreted in a way that they're going to get nothing but positive encouragement for. But I think the deeper value for any of these things is that it's a way for us to encourage content that is helpful, content that is really follows the principles of journalistic integrity and isn't just exploiting our differences or using shock for the sake of building an audience or retaining listeners. So, look, long story short, we welcome Sounder. We are excited for all of the different disparate efforts that are going on in the marketplace right now to commercialize the reward of better journalism and better content. Anything that moves the ball forward in that regard, we're champions of at our agency. We're champions of on this show. On the other hand, just don't forget, quick plug from our partners at Barometer. We got there first, and I haven't seen anything yet out of Sounder that shows something that is a real distinctive factor. But I will tell you, from the ground up at Barometer, we've been very careful to make sure that there is no ownership bias, so that the investments that are being made in that tool are not also kind of double dipping with the interests of making one show that we have an interest in look better than another. We don't have an interest in shows. We have an interest in the marketplace on behalf of brands. And so I think that's something to keep into account as you're looking at what's the right brand solution, brand safety and suitability solution for me. And the other thing is, just remember, if you really believe in the values that are being espoused on this show, we're not just about counting keywords and going, how do we not get in trouble? We're really about advancing values that we think are going to make our communities better. And so, I think that's all for now. But again, all progress is good in this regard. So let's keep moving, even beyond brand safety. Stu, tell us about some of the research that you found this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say the Barometer's the best name. I mean, since it's an instrument measuring atmospheric pressure, I like that. It's a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to put that, I think naming things is important. So a recent study by Analytics Partners, their ROI genome report being released to recession-proof your marketing during a recession, is to switch your focus from short-term goals to more long-term thinking. I mean, I think this is something, it's like we can dust these reports off every time that we head into an economic downturn, which is don't stop advertising, think more long-term than short-term. One of these great points in here is a brand will lose nearly 15% of its market if a similarly sized competitor doubles its marketing investments during an economic down cycle. So just if you decide, I don't want to play the game anymore, and your competitor starts increasing their spend, you come out behind when, if and when we come out of this thing, which of course we will. But the thinking here, the study here is saying, make sure you stay in the game, but not just with short-term media and short-term messaging, to be thinking long-term. And, this lines up with all of the work of the last 15, 20 years of Benet and Fields and Byron Sharp, of going, you always need to make sure that you're looking at your brand building and long-term thinking as opposed to just short-term games. It's just interesting to see that, in particular, during a downturn, you especially want to actually be thinking long-term, have them think about you, make positive associations to you, but you're not going to necessarily be driving them with an offer and getting them to go and using activating message while we're in this tough time.
Well, and what's interesting about this is the conclusion is so counterintuitive, right? It's like saying that, hey, I'm really sick and run down right now. This is the time that I need to be working out the hardest, right? Because what does everybody want all the time? We want instant gratification. We want a Tinder world. We want all our needs sent on demand in real time. And we don't like to have to wait or explain it to people. Now here we are going, hey, you know what? Everybody's pressuring you. You have financial pressure coming from every direction, but we want you to ignore that and don't take the low-hanging fruit of like couponing and discounting and time-sensitive promotions. We want you to set aside the tools that would help you triage potentially the best and focus on only building your core, only doing the hard work that takes a long time to pay off. So I guess my question back to you guys is, do you think marketers care when they see stuff like this? Because, we're in the advertising business. We like this narrative. We say, everybody keep going. Don't cut your budgets. But in reality, do you think advertisers are interested in suspending the needs of today and capitalize to be able to do that? Or is this just, hot air that nobody's really going to listen to? What do you guys think?
I think it's a tough one to listen to. Easy to say, even with smart people and decades of research making the case time and time again, it takes the courage to go, I'm going to switch out of activation messaging. I'm going to say that has nothing to do with the fact that we're getting squeezed right now as things are constricting. Just trust me, boss. Trust me, we're going to do this long-term messaging. And in 12, 18 months from now, you're going to thank me for how much market share we captured, because our share of voice went up and then our share of market went up and we built our brand. The courage it would take to implement that, that's why they write great case studies about them. But in my experience and having been at Oxford Road for, since before the beginning, many years, most folks I see kind of do one of two things, which is they either just freeze, they stop, they cut, they have to. It's like cutting. We just got to stop. I got to stop the bleeding. First they cut staff, then they cut their advertising budget. Or it's just, I really got to focus on what I've seen work before. And so let's just do more of what I've seen work before. In practicality, that's what I feel like I've seen play out. And so to answer your question, the study's great, sounds cool, kind of sounds like how to win a gold medal at the Olympics. So how realistic is it that I'm going to get a shot to do that anyway?
Yeah. Spencer, Kristen, any thoughts from you guys?
18 years in this business, and I survived 2008, right? That was a tough one. And the advertisers that I work with, I've always been in performance media, and it's been consistent where they know they should stay on for brand recognition. They know they want to be like part of that muscle memory of, okay, well, when they're ready to make a decision, I'm going to be where they go. They know this. But the reality of pulling that trigger and saying, okay, well, we're going to stay in, we're going to do it. We're going to change the messaging. It's like what Stu was saying. It's just incredibly difficult because they're depending on performance to keep the lights on. And, it's a tough thing to do. It's incredibly brave. And for the ones that can do it, fantastic. All of them know they should, but it's hard to pull that off.
Very well said. Spencer, anything to add on that?
My only real understanding of recessions is the immediate aftermath of COVID, when we saw mass cancellations across the board, especially for our advertisers with consumer products because of supply chain issues and other factors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the advertisers who were able to stayed on, knowing that the long-term strategy would do them best, and that who knew how long the pandemic was. But for the rest, it was a constant battle. Communication was at an all-time high with both the account team and the media team. And the amount of hand-holding that we saw was unprecedented. I think anytime that there's economic downturn, it does take a lot of courage to stay in the game, but we know what we know, and that's going to be true no matter what happens in the future.
So this little segment's for the courageous. This is for the courageous listeners.
I would add one more C to that list. And I think, just to kind of put a bow on this, I think it's really important for people in the advertising community that are listening, because courage is definitely required if you're going to sacrifice short-term sales for long-term growth. That's a piece of it, but even courage, I don't think will get you through if you don't have capital. You've got to be able to afford to do this too. And some people already have that capital, and some people want to get it now, but they can't. And I think at the end of the day, you have to play your position, right? And if you're somebody that raised a lot of money a long time, within recent memory, and you're sitting on some capital, and you can hunker down and keep a consistent message to the right audience to reinforce your brand, that is money well spent if you can do it. But don't try to do that hoping that it's going to catch up in the next few months, because it may not, and you don't want to use all your fuel if it turns out that you've really got to go the distance here. So I would recommend courage to the capitalized, and for everybody else, you got to do the best you can.
Well, and one more note on this, because I think it is important. It's easy to sit here and go, you need to be courageous and have a lot of money, and then it would work. Look, another element of this report, and I think it fits in here perfectly, is your creative contributes 2/3 of the impact of your ad campaign. So in these times, another thing to focus on, let's say, forget the courage piece. The capital thing is a challenge. Then a lever you've got left is your messaging, right? Is your creative, and is it working as hard as it can work to accomplish the goals that you're accomplishing? Just so we're not painting a picture that's too grim to go, your two options or something kind of ambiguous or having a war chest. It's, something else to focus on.
We can put the "it depends" asterisk on this one because everybody's in a different field with different demand and different, experiences of the dynamics. So, all right. While we're talking about all this gloomy stuff, Kristen, maybe you can tell us about football.
Are you ready for some football? Because I am.
I don't even know what that means.
So the Athletic
is this a British sport?
No, football, American football. So the Athletic has announced its slate of 17 local football podcasts for the upcoming NFL season. So what this means, football fans are going to have local content, their local teams to choose from to follow for when the sport takes off in the fall, which is, we're entering into preseason and training camp now. So these guys have a lot of stuff to talk about. Sports does really well for us. We've seen a lot of success in sports, especially when we buy some of the local football podcasts currently as like kind of a run of network because they're smaller. But I love this because it's just another avenue for marketers to tap into for those local, loyal fan bases, especially when it comes to football. People are true fanatics when it comes to football.
All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the part of this that I love. As you guys know, I've been talking about the fact that radio's the first paid commercial in radio where somebody paid cash money for radio was 100 years ago, August 28th, 1922. So it'll be 100 years. But just in looking at all that, early on in 1921, there was only like 10 stations. And then as of 1923, there's like 500 stations. One of the main things there in the birth of radio that people wanted to hear, right, is weather reports and sports scores. Local sports scores. And the reason we know it was local is because the broadcast area of those early stations, right? KDKA or whatever in Philadelphia that broadcasts the presidential election results, only 1,000 people even had sets to receive it within the range of what of where you could hear it. So their CPM was easy to calculate because that was their total listenership. But my point is, local sports has been a core piece of audio. So to see it come back around is pretty cool.
But
yeah.
What do you think, Spencer?
What's really interesting about the fact that we're going local with podcasts is that podcasts are one of the main media sources that are on demand, meaning that they're everywhere while still being in audio format. And that means that you can listen to local news and commentary from anywhere in the country. And you would think that that was kind of a strategy that we wouldn't be thinking about from a podcast buying perspective, because we usually look at things that, hit a lot of different people with a varied audience. But when you are podcast planning, a lot of the times, you just generally have a single genre breakdown that you're working off of while you're layering back in rationale. If you really want to drill down into your insights while you're planning for a specific client, having the information that like certain markets work better for them is a better tool for planning than simply just throwing, 5 football podcasts on a plan, a couple of basketball, and maybe some golf. This is a very clear indicator of success if you have those geometrics, and is also a great way to drill down and reach the audience who are going to connect the best with your messaging, with your client. And it's something that I'm extremely interested in, especially because a lot of the football podcasts that we do buy currently, we can only buy as a run of network, meaning that they're all bundled together. And as interesting as that is, and a great way to, fill budget or figure out who listens to what, actually having individual options to try is a way more interesting opportunity for us on the media side.
Well, Sorry. Oh, please. No. By all means. By all means.
No, I was thinking because, a lot of the podcasts that we're buying, we're going for like the heavy reach, right? We want podcasts with lots of impressions because we're trying to reach a maximum amount of people. And we know going into something local, it's going to be smaller. It's going to be geo-targeted without geo-targeting. And, because we know sports work so well, we can kind of offset the need for heavy reach for having that truly targeted audience in that market. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays.
Yeah. So as somebody who is generally very disinterested in sports, I think this is a very interesting story. People who read our newsletter, The Influencer, that see our predictions the last few years, we keep predicting that local podcast is going to be more of a thing. And we're starting to see those signs now take flight. It's a sign for the industry because we didn't have enough consumption. When there wasn't enough consumption, you couldn't slice it small enough to allow for an audience size on a local interest initiative so that it would be worth monetizing. It falls into the long tail. You have podcasts about everything, but until they get to a certain point, you can't really bring them to the advertising community. This is a breakthrough moment where we're seeing that the consumption and engagement is high enough in regions that you can actually have topics that appeal only in those specific areas. So basically, everybody that's been a local advertiser has been sitting on the sidelines for a decade going, well, I want to participate in podcasts, and they can't. This is giving them new life and an opportunity to do that. And people get nuts about sports. It's a tribe. It's an affiliation. It's an affinity group. And the best way to place an ad from a performance standpoint is to associate with something where there is affinity that you can tap into. And better yet is when it's an affinity that people aren't going to judge you for because it's based on a political leaning. People don't really get that, take it that personally if you like your local team, right? So it's a safe space. It's a great opportunity for local brands, and it's a great sign for the industry that this is going to keep flourishing. And I think it's you're going to see a rebirth of local in the next 10 years, local news, local sports, and also weather, because for so long they haven't been able to compete because the world hadn't been, as I'll say, retrofitted to digital. And now these old channels are starting to find ways to package and distribute in the new digital world. And I think that's going to create a renaissance for local media. And I think sports is probably going to lead the charge on that. So I think this is a cool one. And local journalists will have their jobs saved because of some of these types of initiatives. So next, one that's very, very close to my heart. Time that I don't spend watching sports, I will try to watch content that HBO makes. So I want to hear all about this one. Spencer, what's going on?
A very interesting article. It initially was fueled by the closing of Batgirl, which was supposed to have a $90 million budget to start and has been canceled. And then fans took quickly to the internet to basically create a panic around the possibility of a cancellation of the site itself. We saw on Thursday, August 4th, that the shareholders have met. And yes, HBO will be merging with Discovery Plus under the Warner banner sometime in summer 2023. This is also on the heels of them literally breaking the record for Emmy nominations of any site or channel ever. And for marketers, this is quite interesting. Netflix, as we all know, is partnering with Microsoft for an ad-supported tier to their site, something that we never thought we would see. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for HBO Max not to merge with that as well. Presenting prestige TV OTT for once for advertisers. Should we, as marketers, properly align ourselves with this emerging media? And should we think about understanding its volatile nature as everything moves around in a digital age?
Kristen, you want to take first crack at that?
I'm so excited about this.
Why?
I really, well, so
as a consumer or as a media buyer?
Both. So as a consumer, I'm excited because I have way too many streaming accounts. So I pay for HBO Max. I kind of cut my limit at Discovery Plus. I was like, I'm not going to do it. So if they merge, now I finally get the Discovery shows that I haven't been able to watch. So that's lovely. As an advertiser, we have never been able to advertise on HBO shows. That is not something we've been able to do. We advertise all day long on Discovery Plus, but not on HBO shows. And so finally, we've got an opportunity here to really hit those high reach HBO shows. I mean, their back catalog still gets plenty of streams. So, we've got the new Game of Thrones prequel with ads. Everyone's going to be watching that. So I can't wait to see, how it's going to look when they finally roll this out, what kind of tiers people are going to be willing to pay for, how the advertising is going to fall in, how many breaks, what kind of CPMs are we looking at? For something that's super high quality like HBO, is that going to increase the cost of what we were already buying on Discovery Plus? This is going to be a really interesting new, format for us as marketers. And then, we're going to see how it plays out on other channels, like is Apple Plus next?
I have so many questions here. This is so important to me personally and professionally. So first things first, what I want to know, does anybody know if Batgirl was going to be any good?
It had to be.
Why did it have to be? Maybe it wasn't going to be good.
Was coming back.
Michael Keaton was going to be in it?
Yes, he was going to be Batman back in Batgirl.
Okay, but all right, but we also know that when you wait 30 plus years to do a comeback, it doesn't always work. Top Gun gave it a good look, but most of the time it's a bust.
Correct.
What about Birdman?
Yeah, well, I agree.
But he wasn't coming back.
Yeah, well, I know.
We're not here to question Michael Keaton, but I would question whether Batgirl would have been executed well. But nobody questions Michael Keaton on this program.
Okay.
So I think as a consumer, I think the fear that you're hearing in the marketplace is like, okay, are they going to kill all my favorite shows, and are they going to stop doing great scripted programming, which, has given many of us an emotional connection to the platform? I think that's the fear. I think the upshot, I'm with Kristen, like, hey, the more the merrier. I think this is, I totally agree with what you said, Spencer, that this is, more playing out of what we saw with Netflix. And some people have said that the arc of history, it's all a series of bundling and unbundling of services, like at least business wise, right? We see all of these networks, and we see it in podcast. We saw it in YouTube, when there's a new industry. You get a proliferation of networks, and then all of a sudden they realize they can't all sustain. They found the point of diminishing return where you don't have endless subscriptions that people will continue to buy in all seasons, and then it contracts. And so, it wouldn't be the worst thing if we only had 3 subscriptions instead of 30. Like, that would be nice. And so I don't mind as a consumer from that standpoint, but as a marketer, I think, I would love to see some of the brands we work with on HBO. We know it's the right kind of audience. Whether or not we deserve it, I don't know. I do think that there should be some standards for the people that are gating it. If they just let anybody buy programmatically, and you start seeing like late night DRTV, like true direct response brands, not the type that we work with, but like when you start seeing catheters and gold and reverse mortgages on HBO products, I think that's going to be a little bit jarring. So I hope they have some filters, and they try to go a little bit up market for prestige brands to match with prestige programming. But I think it was only a matter of time. I think that we're seeing that content is moving toward a both and, where you can pay your way out of the ads on super premium content. But for everybody else, if you want it free or if you want it cheaper, you're going to have to put up with it. And hopefully they're discerning and they don't just over course correct in how they do this, so it can be somewhat sustainable. My last word of maybe caution or encouragement to brands who are excited about all of the new possibilities with connected TV is to hold them all loosely, because there is so much change happening. If your marketing strategy earlier this year was dependent on CNN's new streaming platform, that never got off the ground. If Quibi's the answer to your marketing concerns, you're going to have a problem. So take it with a grain of salt, follow the bouncing ball, have an R&D budget so you can dabble in this kind of thing, but be prepared. Don't get over dependent like some of us have on Facebook, to where if all of a sudden there's a little bit of M&A, it doesn't blow up your strategy. That would be my counsel. So enough on that. Guess who's doing the next story? Me. So this is an interesting one. Podcast guests paying up to $50,000 to appear on popular shows. Our friend Ashley Carmen broke this story for Bloomberg in the last week. We traffic in podcast placements. Did we know about this? Did we know what opportunities were available for purchase, that you could just trade in interviews for a fixed cost? What do we think about this one?
This is something I've been seeing, though. Honestly, we've reached out to many of our partners about getting some of our clients on for interviews, and 9 times out of 10, there's some sort of long-term play or cost involved. And so this isn't surprising to any of us at all.
Is it a good thing for the industry? Should it be frowned upon? How do we feel? How does our conscience feel about trading in content? And by the way, let me also disclose, lest it feel like I'm throwing our media folks under the bus. Like, I'm out here going, hey, we're doing this buy for such and such an advertiser. Can we see if they're also willing to throw in some interviews on top of it? Right. And, one of the big components of this story where I think there's debate is whether or not it should be required that a paid interview get disclosed, and what does paid really mean if it's added value versus like a straight transaction. So, but from a conscience standpoint, what do you guys think?
I think that the arc of regulation of commercial audio in this country is towards disclosure, towards disclosing across the board. These are real people. This, let me tell you about the features of this, Food and Drug Administration product that's being advertised. I think that you go back to the early days, Dick Clark with payola.
And what is payola? Do we want to disclose? Do we want to recap
combination?
payola?
I will. It's a combination of the word pay and Victrola. It really is. That's how they came up with it. As ridiculous as that sounds, that's what payola comes from, because you paid to have them pay a record. So you would pay a disc jockey. There was the $100 handshake. Hi Weiss was a Romanian-born guy from the Bronx.
Are you reading Wikipedia right now, or are you really rattling this off?
I am not reading Wikipedia right now. No, I prepared.
I'm so impressed. An actor prepares.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a DJ, the one that I thought of, because I thought I remember hearing in the story. What was the price that was paid for the guest in this story?
Well, they threw out a few of them.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
The top
right?
one was $50,000 was the headline.
So in that congressional hearing stuff, there was a DJ in Chicago. I think it's Phil Lind, and he talked about being paid $22,000 to play a record. That's where that game got to. That's where it got to. Dick Clark was able to escape it all because he comes across great. He's all-American guy in the sense of, I
mean, he's still hosting New Year's Eve every day. And
right. Exactly. So he was able to do
things that others have not been able to do.
He was able to escape it. But all that to say is, the arc of history, like I said, in audio is going to push to go, okay, and it's like with influencers, say if you're being paid to do this, say if you paid to do this. You just have to disclose it. And I think that doesn't take away as much of it as one might think. So you disclose that. If it's great content and a great story, who cares?
Yeah, that's a good perspective. Anything else to add?
I would just add that we do have our advertisers on shows quite a bit, but we use it generally as a paid spot, and it's very much disclosed during. And the thing that you have to understand about this is oftentimes these are people who are influencers, micro celebs, but also saying and touting themselves as experts. And if you have a podcast host bring them on, they're giving them legitimacy, and they're giving them the veil of, this person, I trust this person. This information has been vetted. If they're being paid for it, that's definitely something that needs to be disclosed in the episode. And it also is important from a marketing standpoint, because a lot of times when networks will send out a show, they'll give a description of the host and whatnot, but they also list out the guests. So if this person is on the show and they're actually paying for it, like, that needs to be understood, or else we're going to use that as a metrics for performance for lookalikes or other clients without understanding that performance data isn't attributed to it.
Yeah, completely. So I think we have unanimous alignment around the fact that if you're going to pay for an interview, it's okay to do that, but it should not be a mystery to the consumer. And, we've talked for years about how podcast is like the Wild West, and this is how the West was won. We get infrastructure, big names, big brands, big pipes come in. And so you start to see patterns that follow the history of other industries. The issue is, just because you might still be able to get away with it legally, not disclosing, doesn't mean that you should. And even if you can, you probably won't be able to forever. So definitely worth going the extra mile to make sure that paid engagements are disclosed. I think if you can do that, I think there are ways to do that, as Stu said, in a way that doesn't have to diminish the value of the conversation, but just is open about it. And then where I think things get a little trickier is some of those gray areas where I think we probably need to lean in on this as an agency and go, okay, if something is provided as added value, so it isn't totally clear whether or not the dollars definitely influenced or just may have influenced, what do we want our disclosure policies to be on that? And I think that's something we can get more firm on as we're seeing this kind of topic revealed by other use cases. But certainly it could be a good value for everybody if there's nothing, if there's no misinformation at play or misrepresentation.
Yeah,
so
for sure. And I think in the age we're in is that, like, just being clear, in the current zeitgeist, the people are okay with quite a bit if you just tell the truth and are just open about it. Hey, this is an advertiser on our show, and in fact, they wanted to see if we could do more. And you just lay it out with all the it's anything that smells like you're trying to withhold, especially in the age of information. I think it just it doesn't ever end well for you.
Well, speaking of ending well, Kristen has one final news item for us to introduce. Kristen, would you bring us home?
I will do this. So another company has entered into podcasting. Lionsgate is jumping into the podcasting space with a new division they're calling Lionsgate Sound. So the division is going to operate as a full-service podcast production company, handling production for the studio's film and television businesses, while also overseeing all elements of podcast production for third-party clients. They're leading off with 4 shows. One is about El Chapo, which is actually going to be produced by 50 Cent. So that's going to be interesting. They've also got an interview podcast called Playing Dead, an FBI-focused show called A Nation for Thieves, and then Died and Survived, detailing near-death experiences. So some true crime. So they're tapping into the true crime genre being the #1 genre in podcasts. And what's fun about this is we're starting to see a lot of large production companies with great resources, super talented production teams producing high quality content. Like Shondaland is now coming out with podcasts. Disney has some, Blumhouse has some, and Marvel's put out a bunch of fiction podcasts. So now Lionsgate's entering into the space, hitting up some of that true crime. And I think we're going to see more and more of these larger production companies doing the same as we go along.
Okay, any thoughts from the group on this one? Big news, new company launches podcast unit. What do we think?
I mean, I think it's a testament of what thematically kind of we've been talking about is the Wild West. And then, oh, wow, look, now here comes Sears. That town got settled. They got water. They got this. Now Lionsgate says it's safe to play here. Does that mean they're assured success or anything? No, but these old, media companies that have been around for 100 years, now we're getting all these indicators that this has become a space where everybody feels like they can, not only can they play, but they must think it can pay.
Spencer?
That's definitely a great insight at the end, Stu. Like anyone will just see dollar signs and get into a new form of media. But looking at their strategy, I definitely see that they're learning some things from the Wild West, gathering up their tumbleweeds and so forth. They are creating original content. They're not prepackaging something that already exists, which generally podcast listeners don't listen to as much as original content with hosts that they can really vibe with. And they're working in true crime, which we've seen with a lot of newcomers into the space who work in legacy media. And those are the ones that generally we buy from a DR perspective. So I think it's very interesting, and I would love to get aligned with them going forward for future tests. But like you also said, like they're coming in, there's no real like for true I'm blanking on the word. It's not a sure success.
No.
Cut around.
No. Has every movie that's been put out by Lionsgate been a sure success?
No, but I think
titles.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think my summary of thoughts on this is, oh wow, a 700th entertainment group wants to have a podcast unit. Oh, and they're going to do true crime. How novel. On the other hand, Lionsgate does know how to make things entertaining. They've done it before. And as long as it's not a Lionsgate Plus strategy where they're piling on with, just as an also ran, I think that they, like everybody else in the world who wants to start a podcast, I think they need their expectations managed. If you're going to do quality, be ready to gut it out because there's an awful lot of competition right now. And I hope you've got a good promotional strategy. But for everybody, I think everybody who wants to do a podcast should do one, provided you look at it more like a newsletter where once in a while there can be revenue producing directly, but oftentimes it's really to support a conversation that you want to have with an audience as an ancillary communication point on top of things you're already doing. I think that's the future of the long tail, but too many people think we're going to have Rogan, we're going to have, the next true crime smash. And I think that can lead to people getting really disappointed. So if it's for love of the game, I'm in. And with that, I'm going to close and thank you all for your preparation, for your contributions today. And just to remind our audience that this show is still dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We want you not just to know the news, but to use it for good. And if you're a marketer looking to balance your business objectives with your brand values, please reach out to us. Our agency is called Oxford Road. You can find us at oxfordroad.com, where you'll subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Special thanks to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, Spencer, Kristen, Stew, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.